Yes, we've got the recording. Great. I'm also joined by Desiree Rajiv-Williams from Kapwa Consulting, Jeremy Hayes from Upright Consulting, Daryl Wright from Emerald Cities Collaborative, Manisha Ratu, also from Kapwa Consulting, and Catherine Gajewski from City Scale. And we are all working together in multiple ways, including to advise on ACCC, also known as the American Cities Climate Challenge. I also want to shout out and introduce our wonderful translator, Ana Videles, with HAV or Jav Language Solutions. And just give a quick appreciation before we all dig in to getting oriented with each other. And then, as you see here on your screen, I want to review the agenda of what we have laid out for today. So you've got me, Corinne, doing the welcome. I'm going to then pass it over to ECC, known as Emerald Cities Collaborative, for the Justice 40+ Community Benefits Playbook. We're going to hear also then after about navigating local government with the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, Latino Academy of Workforce Development. We're also going to go ahead and hear from examples of community-led partnerships, where we'll have some breakouts. Breakout 1 will be Highland Park Community Crisis Coalition, and breakout 2 will be the Green Doors Initiative. We'll then have some time to really dig into what's happening in terms of the current Justice 40 landscape. What are the allied efforts, resources, and gaps? And then the final roundup, where do we need to go from here? Right. And again, because this is just for today, I want to go ahead and invite in that, a practice around ever evolving practice, that we have a lot to contribute in this space, and to expect non-disclosure. And with that, I want to get into a little bit of context setting, if you all don't mind, and really just, again, truly appreciate you all making the time and space for such an important conversation and moment in time on the top of many of our minds, especially over the last year since the Justice 40 initiative, which aims to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of federal investment in areas such as clean energy and climate preparedness to disadvantaged communities, and other related efforts past and present at the local and federal levels that have sought to do what public funds are supposed to do, right? Give us and our communities back the dollars that belong to us and yet are so hard to access and ultimately get for most of us, even with the technical capacity and infrastructure to meet the many requirements to even be eligible. And even more so, and more importantly, the community-based organizations who are working hard to keep their projects going with the little to no resources, or maybe even those projects that received insufficient funds in the first place to adequately sustain itself beyond the funding period because of the many limitations. Now, sure, we can plant trees and track carbon capture, right? But what about the staffing and labor to do it all? What about the supplies? Who is going to care for the many trees that need to be planted, for example, that will take years to grow and provide the environmental impact needed in the first place? Just as one project example, right? The reality is oftentimes unknown, and sometimes that means no one, even after a while, leaving many of these projects abandoned, organizations even more economically strained than they were before. And we have the lessons learned from these patterns that continue to persist in various ways. Why? Because the organizations doing the work of federal investment dollar directives are simply not set up for success when it comes to having the requirements in place, let alone the time, technical assistance, staff capacity to even apply or even have enough time, as they are often the last to know, to only encounter some tech glitch maybe that makes all the work putting into applying for federal funds in the first place obsolete. Or even the general operating fund cushion we're supposed to have, also known as reserves. For example, my former org, I had to sunset recently, not a few years ago, about 5 or so, was lucky to have 3 to 6 months of reserves in terms of what we had before closing our doors. And our entire team of staff was at or maybe even below the poverty line to even afford to be able to be reimbursed with these types of grants. Organizations often find themselves, and I can say this because this is true for us even in our current org, doing what we call the federal dollar and public fund hustle, AKA trying to sub under a more likely, desirable organization with maybe a bigger budget, maybe greater capacity, i.e. RFP, acronym soup, RFP, request for proposal, machines to kick us down just a little something with the hope that they don't extract from us and take all the credit so they can continue raking in the big dollars, public, philanthropic, maybe private, for a job well done while they check the box to make them eligible in the first place. And while we might even struggle to make it work or just survive because we just need the money. One thing is for sure, there's a lot of lessons learned, and I've just scratched the surface in my brief rant that I've just got over with you today. Join me for drinks later on another time, and we can definitely get into it. I'm so down. But again, will business as usual in the federal funding world realistically change tomorrow? No. And we have to consider the impact of administration changes on top of that. This is a long game to transform systems, those political, economic, and cultural, so that our public dollars can do what they are supposed to do, help everyone, which means that those most impacted communities thrive instead of struggling to survive. The good news is, and the exciting part is, especially for today, is that the work has been and is happening in terms of the efforts to mitigate barriers in the short term as responsive tactics such as the Justice100 Accelerator, such as the J40 Equity Fund, and so much more that can get us closer to building the key transformative shifts we need so that those dollars can flow easily and more justly. Today is our contribution to come together and convene in a space to strategize, align, and move forward together across the various efforts so that our impact can be greater with the sum of our parts rather than in our limited silos. We all have a role to play. There's still so much to learn, and we can do better about how we collectively leverage our philanthropic and other forms of capital to unlock the public federal dollars we need. This includes an assessment of how CBOs, who you're going to hear from today, are benefiting from federal funding, and also the mitigation strategies versus meeting CBOs where they're at. The journey to Justice100, just to give even a little bit more context for today, convening was inspired by Denise Fairchild, the former executive director of the Emerald Cities Collaborative. Her op-ed to truly build back better, We Need Justice100, which was published almost a year ago. The article was a challenge to go beyond the White House J40, Justice40 initiative, which again, as I named before, aims to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of federal investment in areas such as clean air and climate preparedness to disadvantaged communities. As she stated, we will perpetuate the same institutional structures that created those inequities without careful attention to the other 60% of federal spending. This convening aims to help provide information to CBOs, community-based organizations, across the country for how we can engage with our local, state, and federal governments to actively direct funding to benefit our communities. All of the partners putting on this convening have been engaged in the American Cities Climate Challenge, also known as ACCC, which is funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies. Through their support, we have been able to organize this convening for you all. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dig in. We're going to get started. I want to turn it over to Daryl Wright from Emerald Cities Collaborative, also known as ECC, to ground us in Justice40 and ECC's approach.
So thank you, Corinne. I'm really happy and excited to speak with you today. I'm Daryl Wright from the Emerald Cities Collaborative. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer. I'm based in Boston on Shawmut, Mohegan, Wampanoag, and land, and my pronouns are he, him. My job today is to just describe the Justice40 initiative, explain the goals and focus of Justice40, and define what is meant by benefits and the meaning of and the mapping of disadvantaged communities. My colleague, Artie Griffin, will walk us through the People's Justice40 Plus Community Benefits Playbook, which has been published by the Emerald Cities Collaborative. Next slide. So a little bit about Emerald Cities. Oh, wow, okay. So Emerald Cities is a national organization that's based in Washington, D.C., with local programs in Southern California, Northern California, the Northeast, as well as the Pacific Northwest. So let me dig into to Justice40. Within days of his inauguration, President Biden signed an executive order calling for a whole government approach to ensure that disadvantaged and environmental justice communities received 40% of the benefits of federal investments in the following key areas: clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and the development of clean water infrastructure. Next slide. Now, these benefits include direct or indirect investments, and the intention is to positively impact disadvantaged or environmental justice communities. The federal government has mapped disadvantaged communities, providing locations throughout the country through census tracts that track low income, energy burden, exposure to diesel, particulate matter, and lead paint. This is among the screening criteria. And this is a link, once you receive this document, to the climate and economic justice screening tool. So before my colleague comes on, I just want to sort of next slide. I'll just end by saying that that Justice 40 is merely meant to validate the work that's already been happening in local communities, right? He did not speak this work into existence. He merely validated over 50 years of work that many heroes and sheroes fought as they fought for healthy communities. And we understand the historic disinvestment that has occurred within our communities. And we should be opening we should take advantage of this opening and make it grow wider through vigilant action at the local level. Hence, Justice 40 plus. ECC stands with local communities and our hope that this playbook equips you to demand the resources that our communities so richly deserve. To quote Frederick Douglass, "Power cedes nothing without demand. It never will, and it never did, and it never will." I will pass the baton over to my colleague, Artie Griffin, to walk through the playbook. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. I really want to emphasize that last point you made about ensuring that this is a resource that really equips communities to demand the resources that they deserve, because that is truly the intent behind this resource. I think it was already spoken to how inaccessible federal programming and state programming can be oftentimes for the communities that the programs are meant to benefit. And so that is really the intent behind this playbook, is to make what has historically been inaccessible a little more accessible to our environmental justice communities. So next slide, please, Tamara. So with that, here's kind of just an overview of what this community benefits playbook does. As you can see, we've got several sections within this playbook that really lay out a foundation of highlighting, what is Justice 40, providing an in-depth primer, talking about what it means to create a community benefit playbook and the intent and purpose behind this playbook. And then it also takes the opportunity to really dive into some federal spending bills that have been passed within the recent years to really help people unpack, what are these spending bills? What are they for? How can I use them to benefit my community? And then after kind of providing that overview, that foundation, diving deeper into other issues, some of the issues that communities might be facing, whether that be energy, water, economic justice, environmental and climate justice, or transportation equity, really digging into those issues and really trying to pull out, what are your community's concerns, and then really trying to connect the dots between highlighting those concerns and what federal funding or opportunities are out there that can meet those needs. But then also going a step further and saying, if these are your issues, here's your funding source, but also who are the folks that you should be in community with as you try to advocate for this funding. Really focused on building coalitions around not just other community members and other CBOs, but also different advocacy organizations that are also in these fights. And then building out that coalition so it encompasses more than just community stakeholders, but also our anchor institutions. So working with, your hospital systems, your universities, to help bring them into community as well, to understand what community needs are and how we can be working in tandem to meet those community needs. And then also working with labor to bring them into that conversation. And then also working with your state and local officials, because as you will be able to see with this federal funding, specifically the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, while there is so much funding out there for discretionary purposes, a lot of the funding will be showing up in communities through state and local government agencies that are charged with dispersing that funding. So just really highlighting who community should be engaging with and building these coalitions around to really enhance our opportunities of getting this funding. Next slide, please, Tamara. So with that, as we kind of move in that conversation towards, what is a vision toward Justice 100 look like, I just really want to emphasize the power of collaboration and using this opportunity, this moment really, because as Daryl so eloquently put, this movement has been moving well beyond Justice 40 and it will keep moving well beyond, it has been going before Justice 40 and will continue beyond Justice 40. So really focusing on how we can use this moment to build collaboration within our communities and with other partners, and then just really holding the administration accountable to this Justice 40 promise. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Desiree to facilitate conversation on navigating with local government.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Artie. Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Williams-Raji. I'm with Kapwa Consulting, and I have the privilege of introducing our first panel on how to shift towards those collaborative relationships with local government and state government. Baltazar de Anda Santana is the co-founder and executive director of the Latino Academy of Workforce Development in Madison, Wisconsin. And Mahana Highland is the senior director of community programs at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement in Honolulu, Hawaii. Both organizations are participating in the J40 Fund, a fund supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies through the American Cities Climate Challenge. This fund, which Kapwa Consulting has been supporting, provides up to $30,000 to support community-driven projects that are working collaboratively with local governments to advance clean energy and Justice 40 goals. We've invited Baltazar to share about their Contractor Accelerator program for energy efficiency contractors, and Mahana to talk about Solarize Oahu, which aims to lower their energy burden by bringing equitable rooftop solar energy group purchasing programs to low to moderate income households. Welcome, Baltazar and Mahana. They will share with us their projects and lessons on how they've been able to advance community priorities through government collaborations. For all those listening, I would like to invite you to listen, but also please share your questions in the chat. I'm going to give both of them some ample time to share their individual stories, but our team will be monitoring the chat for questions. So please feel free to ask those while they are talking, and we'll queue them after they're complete. So I'll now turn it over to each of you to tell us more about the project that you're working on in your collaboration. And Baltazar, let's go ahead and begin with you. Can you describe your project a little bit more and and provide more background on how you were able to develop this partnership with your local government?
Thank you very much, Desiree. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. Ken Baltazar de Anda Santana, my pronouns are he, his, and him. And with the program, and I'm reading just a little bit here so I don't say things that I'm not supposed to say. So the Latino Academy, we are partnering with the City of Madison, Department of Civil Rights, Elevate and Sustain Date. We are piloting a contractor accelerator program for energy efficiency contractors in Madison, Wisconsin. This is the beauty of this program is that we are bringing each of our different skills for us to be able to, implement these programs. So we bring the City of Madison, we bring Sustained Aid and Elevate, and then the Latino Academy. Each of us have different expertise in the subject, so we can then come together and do this. And when we talk about the opportunity to apply for this funding, this was not a new idea. One thing that happened a lot at Latino Academy, we always have folks calling us, say, how can we find people of color? Unfortunately, there's always that belief that because I work with the Latino community, I have 100 Latinos just waiting to get hired. Obviously, that's not the case. We always have to build that partnership. We have to establish that partnership with folks. And that's why we were able to put this together, where we are going to be able to prepare our community for them to then go after these opportunities in the green energy sector, for them to be able to go after these contracts with the City of Madison. It is, and the City of Madison recognizes that it's very, very hard for folks to access those opportunities. So with this training, with this pilot that we are starting this year, it's going to be very, very helpful. And I just want to go just a little bit more. Latino Academy, we do not have experience working in the green energy sector. That's why we partner with Elevate and Sustained Aid. But we have 11 years, 10 years of experience providing workforce development. And one of the reason why the partnership was easy was because we already have a history with the City of Madison. They have been funding a number of our projects since 2011. So that's why it was an easy transition. We have been working with them. We are considered strong partners. And one of the things that happens a lot when it comes to these opportunities, we need to make sure that, so one of the areas is how do we deal with conflict that arises from power dynamics? I always have this.
Found them. You guys
I always have this direct conversation with the City of Madison and with funders, and I told them, I said, you are giving us money. There is money as part of this interchange. So we need to recognize that. Many times they call us partners, and we need to figure out what partners, what that means. I think it is important for us to have that clear conversation with them, knowing that in one way or another, there are the ones who are holding the money. There are the ones who are, we have to sign an MOU. So there are clear expectations. At the same time, one of the things that happened, especially with the City of Madison, we have a very strong relationship where, through COVID, we did hold a number of officials accountable for what they were doing or they were not doing for our Latinx community. But again, that conversation was very, very important for us to be able to, because we already have that relationship with them. They already call us partners, we already call them partners. And, just like, obviously, it's always very important for us to dialogue. If we have an issue with the city, if we have an issue with the person that is working without grants, we directly just talk to them. One thing that happens, and we have discovered this, is that many times we are given a project, and I did have a meeting with some of the city folks in another project that we are working, where they were asking Latino Academy to put a percentage into that project, and I have to push back. I said, listen, the fact that we have in this table folks who are making different wages, that's the beginning of inequity. Sometimes we partner with people from the City of Madison. Sometimes we partner with people, and I'm just checking on my time here. Sometimes we partner with people from the City of Madison, from local government. And unfortunately, wages are very different. The grant person might make a little bit more money than the person who is doing the work at the Latino Academy. And I think it's important for us to recognize those issues and to be able to speak to that. One thing that it is very, very important for us is to recognize that we are connected to each other. I'm gonna go back just to how important it was for Sustain Dane, Elevate, the City of Madison, and for Latino Academy to come together. Very different partnerships that I have with other folks. This is the first time that Latino Academy was invited into the table. Many times, I had experience with other agencies where they already put together the program, and then they contact us and said, can you please have a focus group at Latino Academy? Can we send you some flyers? And my question is like, what is that project all about? Can you please explain? And what is the funding? Where is the funding that is gonna help me pay someone? We actually have a situation last week where a partner, they want to partner with Latino Academy. That are so excited, but when I asked them, okay, who's going to do the job? How can I pay someone to do the job? So again, one of the things that I love about the relationship that we have as part of this program is because we were invited from the very beginning. Latino Academy, we are getting the majority of the funding. We are the ones who are going to be doing the work with the community. I think that for us, that's very, very important. One thing that I just wanna, before my time finishes here, one thing that I just wanna bring up here is a concept that I have always used, and I actually just used it last week, about how many times we have to squeeze ourselves into those opportunities. Many times, I have to be very, very honest. Latino Academy is not Latino Academy because we have been invited to the table many times. Latino Academy is where Latino Academy is right now with a budget of $1.2 million and 7 full-time people, because we squeeze ourselves into projects. We hear about it like someone is doing green energy. Oh, okay, so how come we are not? Why are we saying that folks of color are doing this work, but in reality, we are not the ones doing that job? And we call city, we call the county, hey, what's going on with this? Please, can you invite me? Can you make us part of that? Again, many times we do need to squeeze ourselves. Hopefully there will be one day where we don't have to squeeze ourselves. As of right now, we continue squeezing ourselves for opportunities. One thing that we are doing right now, Latino Academy, I never thought that I would hire a government relationships person. It was a difficult decision that I have to make, but I hear about all this funding for workforce development, and I don't know how to navigate politics. I don't know how to navigate, the federal government. So one of the things that we decided was to invest into hiring this government relationships person, and he's helping us to be able to have a clear message. And I'll finish with this. We have Senator Tammy Baldwin 2 months ago. She came to visit the Latino Academy. She came to visit the project. And, we were talking about it. One person asked me, so what was your direct ask? What did you ask of her? I told the person, I said, we had a great presentation. We have a lot of information. And he's like, but what was your ask? And I said, no, I did not ask anything. And he's like, Baltasar, you had in your building the person who is in one of the appropriations committees, and you did not ask for money. Shame on you. So I think one of the things that we've been learning is to have a clear message, to know what we need to ask. But at the same time, it is time for us to invest in these opportunities as well, and to be able to have that clear message. At the same time, we'll continue squeezing ourselves because folks do have to be able to hear us. Thank you.
Baltazar, thank you so much. There's so many good nuggets in what you offered there. You know, starting with just clear expectations when money is involved, being really clear about that accountability relationship, holding government accountable when opportunities come available, being proactive about asking to be involved at the table. And also what I hear is you now pivoting and really looking at building your own capacity to be at these tables continuously. Great points. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mahana, who has a beautiful background there, making us all jealous, of course. Mahana, please take it away.
Hello, my Kako. Let me know too if the sound the wind gets too much here, and I'll move back into my car. But I wanted to come here. I told Desiree I'm going to look for a better background because I was in the apartment and I walked down the street. And the reason why I came here is because I wanted to juxtapose what I'm about to talk about with what most people are typically used to when they think about Hawaii, right? Is our beautiful beaches, you know, the ocean is right there. The sun is a little after 7. The sun is perfect. It's always 82 and partly sunny, partly drizzling here. But what we also have here, and the reason why the initiative that we got involved with is so important is we have the largest percentage of Native Hawaiians here on this island of Oahu on our west side, on our side that probably retains the majority of the sun for most of the day. Yet they carry the highest burden, energy burden, and they are the population on that side of the island is probably on the lower end of our socioeconomic statuses and top the disparity list. You know, I mean, just name it, and they're affected by it. And so this partnership that came together that actually was brought to us as the CBO from individuals from our city and county, from our Hawaii State Energy Office at the state level, from a private funder who you know thinks through funding solutions for situations like this, and then also other smaller nonprofit groups who are focused on energy. You know, Hawaii wouldn't be Hawaii without its Native people. And our mission at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement is to uplift our people. And the reason why is because we know if Native Hawaiians are good, that everybody, that we will be able to, I'm gonna start moving because I know that the wind is getting stronger here, that we will be able to live sustainably. We are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? So resources to get here all come off of a ship. Yeah, all of our energy needs, most of our energy needs, but it's so close to all of our energy needs that I just kind of generalize it that way, come from off a ship in big containers of oil. And that's what makes or break our livelihood here in Hawaii. So the need for a program like Solarize is not only timely and necessary, it's, I think, the partners from both the government and the other smaller nonprofits, you know, for bringing forward this program at this time. You know, some of the challenges that we faced here in Hawaii is, especially with federal funding, politics, of course. And we had strong representation at the federal level when we had senior leadership. Well, those leaders who were in positions for, I would say, over 50 years in Congress, passed on. And then now junior leadership that is from Hawaii doesn't have as much clout and or influence to be able to get a small state like ours, the influence that it needs to be able to direct funding for some of our unique needs. And that's been difficult. That's been one of the biggest access on federal funding and federal resources there. Our own state has had some challenges in that there were goals put out Hawaii is supposed to be 100% renewable energy by 2045. We have an electric monopoly here in Hawaii. We have one provider of electricity for over 1 million people here on this island. And that dynamics between the politics, the state politics and state goals and the goals of the people here, and the fact that we just have one main provider of electricity that also pretty much regulates how different renewable energy projects are not directly but indirectly either brought about, the success of them, you know, how widespread they can be, and so forth. And so that's been a challenge that we're starting to work through, you know, and I didn't believe it, you know, until I saw it with my own eyes, and the members of our coalition who are stepping forward from all the different states and county partners to be able to say, hey, we have a community out on the west side of our island that has the largest population of indigenous people and suffer the highest energy burden. We need to direct some solutions that way. And so let's look for partners, or a partner or multiple partners in the community that can help us educate the community, and then also bring this, you know, through fruition. One of the challenges that we have on the community side is that we have a huge distrust in state and county government and federal government, of course, right? There's some political mistrust. There's also the fact that this particular population of both Native Hawaiians and other minorities that live in this area have been studied and poked and prodded, you know, for generations, right? And without benefit, right? So there's a lot of people who come and promise solutions to this community, but it never quite follows through or happens, right? So we have a distrust coming, swell coming up from the community, and then also the kind of navigating of the government structures that this coalition is in between, that we have to kind of thread through and mend together. But we're willing to do it because we see the need. We see the just such important need to have solutions be implemented. Have the solution be implemented, especially in this space. One of the other challenges that we've had to navigate is the fact that with the initiatives that are being brought up now in Congress, it seems like, or it is like in 2020, when the pandemic hit, it spun everybody out of control. There was so much trying to, I mean, just personally our own lives, and then, you know, in the systems, trying to figure out how to now, you know, find solutions to the problems that were happening, and then actually implement them, and what that all meant. We were building the plane and flying it at the same time, right? The world was doing that at that time, right? And we've also found that just in our work at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement with the federal agencies that we have to deal with, and we're facing that now also with this, is that the agencies themselves are figuring it out, right? They're trying to figure out how it is now that their work shifts and meets demands. There's a, you know, when Biden came in, of course, there's a change of guard. Most of the time, the people who are in the federal agencies remain the same. I don't know what your guys' experience has been, but for us, there was a like massive movement going through the federal government. We had a hard time keeping track of all of our contact people, you know, within the various organizations or agencies, to you know, check on funding when it was coming. Lots of things were delayed. And so our capacity where we could kind of handle, you know, and mitigate issues at one level, we knew that we had to expand. So between 2020 and now, we brought on for the various work that we do, but and even in this particular work, we're planning to expand our teams. You know, we've grown, you know, like doubled the size of our organization, tripled it actually, from 2020 until now, just because of that, just because navigating the federal kind of like chain of or you know, ring of resources in DC has been extra challenging during this time. And it may just be us because of our distance. We often feel left out of those more continental conversations that happen. Yet we're the perfect, you know, poster, you know, we'll be the first to raise our hands and say, hey, come, you know, pilot your projects, you know, with us, because we need resources coming our way. And we often feel forgotten, you know, and kept out of the loop of the conversations, one, because we're small, and two, because we're so far away, right? Yeah, so sorry, I don't know how I'm talking
No
too
worries.
much.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think that sentiment is very much shared even on the mainland by many organizations. And I think just even what you've shared in terms of your relationships and tracking, in some ways, perhaps the connectivity you have to your legislators in some states. There are a lot of organizations doing good work who don't even have that relationship. And so I think what you shared in terms of just those relationships and your organization tracking that is really critical and important. And so thank you for sharing those challenges. We haven't received any questions so far. So I just wanted to ask one of both of you, because we're close to wrapping up our time for this session, which is do you have any advice to the folks who are here listening on how to engage in these collaborative relationships, like maybe one or two lessons that you've learned from each of your projects? Mahana, I'll start with you and then we'll pass it to Balthazar.
Awesome. Yes. First lesson that I've embraced is that not all parts of any of the government infrastructure are bureaucratic or bothersome, right? That's our kind of normal reaction as community, is that we're in a battle with government at times, whether it be our city county government or and because of what Balthazar said, right? We often find ourselves trying to squeeze ourselves into some other mechanism, some other vision that's put out there that we have, that, you know, we look at it and we go, what are they thinking when they created that? You know, but we would try to find a way, you know, in order to provide what is needed, you know, amongst the people. But what I've found, and I've thoroughly embraced, is that it's even amongst the community organizations that one of the things that we have to do is we have to seek out and search for those individuals within these bureaucracies that have the passion, the commitment, and the ability to help us forward and navigate that. It's not only their job to come look for us. Yeah, we would be better off if we searched out each other, right? And before, I don't think we did that. The second lesson that I learned was that we have to put ourselves out there. We have to tell the story. As the ones responsible for the community organizations, we have to tell the story of what is actually going on, code switch into whoever's language that needs to hear it, so that it makes it easier for them, right? And I know this is a huge burden, and there was a time in our community work where we were like, we refuse to keep trying to translate for everybody, right? You know, but what I've seen now is I've seen the stress and the toll that it's taken on people who are really trying to do good work in all different levels and sectors, that if we just provided that bridge, right? If we can, if we have the capacity to be the bridge builder and connect our story to their resources, right? Then I think we can make the cycle work for us, you know, and for the betterment of all of our programs.
It makes
Thank
it
you.
easier to do the right thing. Right.
Yeah, make it too easy for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Baltazar?
Thank you very much, and thanks for all those great comments. You know, I think two things that I am actually learning. I think the fact that we are here presenting, we were not chosen. Like I wasn't chosen. I volunteered myself to present, which that's very, very important. I think I come with a humble attitude where if there are 5 people in the room, only one might get to know the work that Latino Academy does. So again, just like what happened in the, you know, like what happened in those soccer games, you know, when the little guy or the little person is not chosen, we go and it's like, oh, I can do the work. I am okay doing the work. And I think, you know, we need to put ourselves out there. It's very, very, very important. You know, and I think I wish government will know who the heck Latino Academy is. I wish all of you will know, but the reality is that we need to continue working. We need to promote and do marketing as to some of the work that we are doing. One of the other things that we are doing at Latino Academy, we are developing our pitch as to who we are. Right now, we are working with someone who's helping us to develop that 30-minute pitch, 15-minute pitch, and 1-minute pitch. Because what we need to do is be able, like what you were saying, you know, to be able to tell our stories. And the last thing, and I'll finish with this. Last week, I was asked, "Are you planning on going to Washington, D.C.?" And my question was, "Why?" And the person said, "Because they need to see you not just here in Madison, they need to see you in Washington, D.C. You need to go and meet those folks where they are as well." So right now we are kind of putting together a number of dates for me to go to Washington, D.C. You know, so again, that's something, and many of you might be like, okay, so of course we need to be in Washington, D.C. But sometimes when you are working, when you are doing the direct work with the community, we forget about all those pieces of information that is very, very important for them to know who we are.
Fantastic. Thank you both. I'm hearing a really strong message around being able to have a narrative. And, you know, we do have some funders that are on the call, and, you know, sometimes it's those things, the capacity to even tell the story, the capacity to build that capacity, right? And to put out there what it is that you want, what it is that you need, and to have presence, and whether that's physical presence, whether that's virtual presence, whether that's a narrative presence, how critical that is for our community-based organizations. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your lessons and your learning. And we so appreciate you being here with us. And I will go ahead and pass it back to Tamir.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you both. That was so great. I actually am now thinking about narrative and bridge building strategies. I'm going to transition us into our breakouts, which will be another opportunity for everyone to hear from communities that have established local government relationships and been able to leverage those really in order to apply for federal funding to move their projects forward. Both projects are Justice100 Accelerator grantees, which launched last year with 52 projects interested in applying for federal funding, majority of which would be for the first time, and with the purpose of providing TA and capacity building partners to support projects navigating the public funding process. So in Breakout 1, I will be moderating with Rafeal Mojica, who's the program director at Soulardarity, which is a coalition member of the Highland Park Community Crisis Coalition, also known as HPC3.
Highland Park, Michigan is one of 22 communities that has been selected to participate in the DOE Communities LEAP program. That's the Local Energy Action Program. And through a collaborative effort amongst multiple stakeholders, including HBC3, Soulardarity, Avalon Village, Parker Village, and Highland Park Water and Engineering Department, the city is now eligible to receive up to $500,000 worth of technical assistance to address their energy crisis. So that's Breakout 1, and we will have Spanish translation for Breakout 1. And in Breakout 2, Jeremy Hayes with Upright Consulting will be moderating with Donele Wilkins, President and CEO of Green Door Initiative. Mrs. Wilkins has been participated in the development and adoption of an environmental justice policy in the state of Michigan, launched the first green jobs training program in the city, and Green Door was recently awarded the DOE Inclusive Energy Innovation Prize this month. So they're going to be expanding their climate smart job training and placement programs and create a model sustainable neighborhood block with jobs installing solar panels. And I just learned this week that you're going to be training 200 youth to install 1,000 solar panels in the city. So folks will be self-selecting either Breakout to learn about the projects, their collaboration with partners, including city and local government, how those relationships formed and lessons learned. We have 45 minutes for those breakouts, and we'll open up the conversation after each presenter talks to really have a conversation about people sharing their own examples and where appropriate, supporting one another and generating ideas how to build collaborative opportunities, and in some cases, navigate historically adversarial relationships with local government. So each presenter will have about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll have some folks moderating the chat. I see some questions in there from this session. Maybe we can address those in the breakout. And so Manisha will put the breakouts again. You'll select which one you want to join. And then after the break, we'll have a brief landscape analysis of Justice 40, what's happening, where are the allied efforts and gaps. So please stick around after the breakout. So Manisha, if you can launch those breakouts. Again, folks will just choose one. Breakout 1 will be Highland Park, and Breakout 2 will be Green Door Initiative.
45 minutes. I just did. So I have a background in local government, and during the American Rescue Act years under the Obama administration, managed a lot of federal funding, and over the years have reflected about kind of what worked well and what didn't work well. But from that position in local government, we were able to partner with a lot of our community-based organizations and to flow some of that federal funding down into the community through all sorts of different ways. So when the Justice 40 initiative was launched, I started to think back on that experience, think about kind of what we could have done better, the lessons that we learned, and how that collective wisdom and knowledge can ensure that in this federal funding moment and with the Justice 40 initiative in place, that we can do as much as possible, go as far as possible in ensuring that resources get to where they are needed the most and get as close to the problems and as close to the solutions as possible. So I've been in the last year or so working on Justice 40 in a few different directions. I was able to support the Justice 40 Accelerator in partnership with Elevate Energy.
Catherine, yes. we are not able to see your slides. So I just
let me try to figure this out. I'll do that here. 1 second. I'll put those back on. And have also been partnering with Kapwa Consulting and the team on the Justice 40 Capacity Building Fund, which has been focused on kind of this gap and this opportunity that I and others have been seeing to think about how local government can serve as a partner to community to flow the resources that are going from federal to state to local down to community. So we'll talk more in just a minute there, and I am going to share my screen again. Thank you for bearing with me. It's always something. Okay. There we go. So we've got about 10-15 minutes and want to open this up for conversation. So I'll keep this intro quite short. But I think the question that our group of collaborators has been sitting with
we come onto the Justice 40 initiative in different ways. Emerald Cities has been working on the Playbook. Climate Innovation has been supporting the implementation of the Justice 40 Accelerator in partnership with that awesome team. Kapwa Consulting has been leading the Justice 40 Capacity Building Fund. So we've been in conversation together to just share our experiences and observations, and we wanted to create this space to open it up even more, because we've been hearing in the relationships and conversations we're in that there's a real interest in more coordination. So want to kind of come together and just talk about, like, what are we seeing? What are we a part of? What's on the horizon? What are some of the key gaps? A quick walk down memory lane. We're about a year and a half into the Justice 40 initiative. And so in January 2021, Justice 40 was launched by executive order signed by President Biden. The WEJAC was appointed shortly thereafter. There were some responsive efforts that came after the Justice 40 commitment. Justice 40 Accelerator was launched about 6 months later. The Bezos Earth Fund made a significant commitment with $130 million in grant making. Many of the organizations that receive funding are on this call today with us. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act was signed into law. We have $1.2 trillion coming our way with the Justice 40 commitment attached to it. But there are no earmarks. There's no earmarked Justice 40 funding. This is not a law. This is not a mandate. It's an initiative of the Biden administration. And we know that the political context is changing, will change. We're in a very dynamic environment. So how do we use the moment that we're in, the Justice 40 moment that we're in, to be building towards Justice 40? What needs to happen over the next 2 years to ensure the delivery of the Justice 40 vision and to carry us forward with some sustained investment in infrastructure? Those are some of the questions that we're holding. So here's where we are, and then here's what's expected over the summer, kind of what we can be anticipating in the next couple of weeks and months. CEQ, many of you engaged with the beta screening tool that CEQ put out this winter. There was a public comment period, and I believe over 60 substantial comments were submitted around the tool and how it can be improved. So CEQ is right now working through those comments and feedback to put an improved version of the tool out in the coming weeks and months. We're also awaiting a Justice 40 scorecard that's under development right now. And then also in the mix with all of this is going to be guidance to federal agencies on how to use the tool. And as agencies are starting to deploy funding, they'll be applying Justice 40 criteria to the funding that goes out where and as relevant. So there's a lot of work underway. A lot of resources are already flowing. Even more are coming. We're getting signals from federal agencies that they are trying to get creative, that they're thinking about how they can require, especially in some of the competitive funding, how they can require community partnerships. That might get defined differently than it's been in the past. So there's a lot of work underway. We're learning a lot. We've learned a lot. We will continue to learn a lot. And I think the questions that we want to open up into the group for conversation now are, how can we be working together collectively to maximize this moment? So kind of how are folks successfully leveraging and organizing now? What more do we want to make happen? What's it going to take to pull that off? How might we build from these years towards Justice 100 and leverage Justice 40 to what we know is the longer ongoing work to Justice 100? So with that, I am going to pause and invite you all to join me in some conversation, and really just want to invite your insights and experiences, and what's this looking like from your vantage point? What are you seeing, and what are some of the big issues, ideas, and gaps that we need to be surfacing and kind of looking at together? So with that, I will pause and invite you all into conversation here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen since this was a little bit of a funky setup too. Anyone want to kick us off? And also for those who are able, would love you to come onto camera with us and be in the conversation. Oh, and one more thing that I wanted to do, I'll give everyone a minute to kind of think about what you might want to bring into this space, but in preparation for the session, I started to just put together kind of a list of some of the resources in one place that we know to be out there. So put together kind of what's come out of the federal government, what some of the allied efforts are that we know are underway or under development, where some research and analysis has come out around Justice 40 that might be useful. So opened up the permissions there and feel free to share and add on.
Catherine, there was a request to add the questions into the chat.
Yep.
Or I see a question here from Kyle. He's asking, or she is asking if there are federal funds that are specifically for EJ hiring.
For EJ hiring?
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more? And I know there are some other folks on, Tamira and Stacy and others who are familiar. But can you say a little bit more about what you mean?
Sure. So we have gotten some, project-based grants and some Department of Energy technical assistance for community solar work that we're doing that's, deeply embedded in EJ principles. But now we need staff, and there are people, in the Black community, Latinx community, Somali community that would like to work for me today. But we need to get a funding source to start hiring them for this kind of huge backlog and potential work to really get a democratized renewable energy infrastructure set up in Minneapolis. And it's so much easier to get project grants, and then small orgs are constantly scrambling to manage them. So just wondering about, actual hiring resources for community members, from marginalized communities, BIPOC leaders, et cetera.
Okay, great. I'm going to crowdsource that one. And if anyone has any specific resources that you know about that feel responsive to that need, if you could throw some thoughts into chat, that would be great. Anyone else want to come in and just kind of, what's the activity around Justice 40 that you're seeing? And more specifically, are there any gaps and opportunities that you want to surface and kind of make us all aware of so that we can be thinking about what we might build towards next? For sure, additional just capacity building resources, we're hearing a lot, and thinking about kind of both where public and private philanthropic resources can help to address those needs. Anyone else want to come in?
I can. Hi, I'm Celeste from Common Strategies from Ohio. Just in our observation, I would say access to a lot of this is not available for a lot of community partners who maybe don't focus on entirely environmental justice, but like want to evolve in that, or just have people who are affected and just don't know how to create those opportunities with either local governments or even just their nonprofits to get access to these resources. If you're not in the environmental justice or solar space, you don't know. But I think that those organizations will benefit from being able to partner on a lot of these things because they have the reach to educate.
Sorry, Celeste, when you say those organizations, can you be like, who do you mean specifically? And maybe you said it, but sorry.
For example, like our urban league, our urban league is, they say they work on environmental justice stuff, but they've never had like the capacity built in to really train up their staff on what that looks like. They're always in the community. Or if we look at like our NAACP, who says they do environmental justice, but don't have the opportunities to participate.
Thank you.
And Kyle, some good resources in chat if you haven't been able to take a look.
Hi, my name is Bill Beamer, and I actually have a comment that is, I think, tangential to what Celeste had mentioned. I used to work in government. I used to work for the city of Portland, and now looking to do work of my own. And so I'm putting together In fact, I have a collaboration with a number of different folks. And one of the problems that I see is, especially if you're talking about trying to reach impacted communities, in a lot of impacted communities, the backbone of those communities are small businesses, small entrepreneurs, and they cannot access funds when you're talking about funds having to go through nonprofits. So for instance, I'm working with some Black farmers, builders, architects. These are not necessarily folks who are in the nonprofit business, but we are coming up with unique and innovative ways to address climate, but you don't have access to that. So the thing is that if you have to form a separate entity just to access the money, you're not really able to connect with a lot of folks who really need the funds, because you're talking about communities that don't have the money in the first place. And if you're putting these additional financial and administrative burdens on folks to access the funds, it's not going to be as effective.
Thanks so much for that. Appreciate that, Bill.
Hi, yeah, I have a suggestion. I guess it's more so than anything. This year, there's a lot of things that are happening. I really believe, and I'm still trying to learn myself of all the many great things that I see with the Justice 40. But two of the things that I think people may be aware of and not, and maybe in your region as well, is that we have COP27 this year. And COP27 is the first environmental justice conference that's going to be held in Africa. And so when I think of the connection of our communities that are in Black communities, in BIPOC communities, this is going to be a very big thing because of a lot of the misconception of how does environmental justice play out in our neighborhoods? Do we get the media? Do we get the attention? And I think there's a possibility that Justice 40, possibly, I don't know what the staff is like, and I'm not quite sure what we're gonna be doing ourselves in the process, could possibly do a statement, could possibly do a delegation, could possibly bring the voices of those of us here into that platform, because that usually doesn't happen. And so that's one. The other thing that I was thinking about is in our state of California, we're very connected to those advocates that are even housing, to those advocates because of the United Nations that talks about unhoused. Even though we have a refinery, I have asthma, I live near the refinery. And that's part of the legislation of AB 3121, which is about reparations. A lot of people have heard that we may be the first state in the nation to have reparations as a state. But what it's going to also highlight is some of these communities that has left the intersectionality of BIPOC and African Americans, especially in our town, because people that moved from the South came to Richmond to build the shipyards, and they live the closest to the refinery. So we are dying and a lot of people aren't working. And so therefore they're displaced. And I think even somehow I want to see, I'm not quite sure how those pieces can formulate maybe a sheet or something is what I thought. Like, how could we highlight for each of our cities, what are the major legislation and things like COP27 that may be priorities for us? I'm not sure if there's something like that already, a one pager. So that way, a lot of us that may know your cities or what you're doing can really look and even support, and even maybe even sign a petition on change.org for those type of things if we knew how to support each other. So anyway, yeah, that's some of the things that I'm thinking about. AB 3121 legislation, which is not seem to be for most people thinking of environmental justice, but it's very going to be, because we've got our young people doing that in our community for environmental justice, but also the COP27 and whatever else similar to those. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Alita. Appreciate all of those additional comments and resources. And we are getting very close to time, and also appreciate all of the questions that were posed towards the end. Some are more difficult to answer than others. But we started off the call with, accepting that this may be a space where we have to accept non-closure and that there's more to be done. But we hope that what we offered here today was some inspiration and some, guidance, thinking resources around how to organize around these federal funds. And so it is, as we said, an organizing moment, as it always is. But here we have this opportunity to really push and drive the conversation, the investment into our communities. And what we've heard today are stories about how we prepare, how we show up, what kinds of capacities we can express and articulate the needs for in order to have offensive strategies to get ahead of the conversation, as opposed to be putting down the line and sort of like waiting for it to come to us. We have to be at the start of those conversations. And so hopefully some of these resources will help you to do that. We hope that you can answer some of the questions in the Mentimeter. The link was put into the chat. And there are 2 questions. What is the next step that you will take? I think we were going to try to show you all the responses to those. We actually only see one. I think you have to refresh your screen, Manisha. Not sure if there are others there. And then the second one is what support resources would be helpful to you. Manisha, unfortunately, we don't see the updated responses to that, and we are at time. So we did promise that we will share with you all the notes from this meeting. Our collective organizing team, we're thinking about what we can do to continue taking the opportunity to leverage what we're learning to be impactful and support the work that our community-based organizations are hard at work leading. And so we'll have more to come from there to give back to you. But for now, thank you all so much for joining us today, continuing in this conversation, continuing in this learning. And yeah, we will be in touch. Thanks, everyone. Take care and have a wonderful Monday, wonderful week. And yeah, best of luck to you all.